Welcome to 21st Century Learning, exploring the intersection of education and technology. This is episode number 15.03, and you're listening to the EdTech Talk channel of the World Bridges Network. Today is March 10th, 2016. I'm Alex Ragone.
And I'm Arvind Grover.
And we have a guest today, Arvind.
I know we've got a special guest. I'm excited. It's been a few episodes since we had a guest on this show, and I'm excited to welcome Lisa Damour to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And people know us. We're old hats here, but we'd love for them to get to meet you. So if you want to give us a little bio on you, it can be a short one.
Sure. I'm a psychologist. I write and speak and think about girls in particular, though as a psychologist, I take care of kids, both boys and girls. And I also consult to schools. I keep a foot firmly planted in the life of a school here in Shaker Heights, Ohio, where I live.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. I know your time is busy, and so I appreciate you giving us some of it.
Well, everybody's busy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I'm going to pretend that I'm on the virtual couch for today.
Okay.
And let you work with me. So I actually first learned about your work many years ago when I was working at a girls' school, and we came out to visit the girls' school where you were working in the Center for Research on Girls. And I just want to plug the Center for Research on Girls because I think that's a great resource for people, and we'll share a link to that in the show notes. But tell us how you first got involved with working in girls in particular.
I think, one of the things that happens when you're a younger psychologist, and I no longer classify myself as a younger psychologist, I'm well into middle age, but when I first moved to Cleveland, it was 2000, and I was 29 years old, and I was building my practice, and, a lot of people feel like adolescent girls want to talk to somebody who doesn't remind them of their mom. And so a lot of clients were coming my way who were teenage girls because what people were saying is, we hear that you're a psychologist, we hear that you're, not bad at what you do, but we also hear that you look young, and that, and you look younger than at least the moms did at that point. And so that was how I ended up taking care of a lot of teenage girls in my practice. And then through that, Laurel School, which is this amazing school where I get to be the consulting psychologist and run the research center, was looking for a consultant. And since I was sort of a known quantity in the community and they knew I took care of a lot of girls, they asked me if I wanted to come on board.
And it seems like it was the purpose of the center's design to support the kids at the school, or do you have a broader mission than that?
Our tagline is putting the world's best research to work for girls. So first and foremost, that's got to be our own girls in the building, and we actually work out a lot of content with them, and we study them and research them, but we also really, really take seriously the work of dissemination. And we work really hard to make what we're working on available, put it up on our website in digestible, research brief ways that let people really access all the work we do and then apply it in their own schools with the girls they're caring for, or if they're parents, to apply it at home.
And where did you first get started with where did the Research Center sort of first focus its energy?
It came to be in sort of a lot of organic ways, but one of the things that happened was that, I keep a position at Case Western Reserve University. I'm a clinical instructor there. And one of the graduate students I was working with really wanted to do her dissertation on friendships in the middle school. And none of the other faculty members had contact with middle school. And I said, actually, you could come over to Laurel School and we could collect your data there. And that was one of the ways that it began. And then alongside of that, one of my hats that I've always worn is to do writing of various forms. And I was writing a college textbook at that time and was coming across Carol Dweck's work and the work on stereotype threat. And I was saying to the head of school, this is great stuff. Like, we should be implementing this in the day-to-day of our work. So it was kind of a confluence of events that brought it together. And then we found that parents and other educators wanted to know what we were doing. So we started to develop a three-pronged approach of doing original research when we had questions that needed to be answered, working with the research that's already out there but not necessarily well translated for schools and families, and then helping other schools and families and the girls in our building access that research in ways that are useful to them.
Oh. I can't even imagine as a school administrator what it would be like to have a research arm in my school. How valuable that must be. Yeah.
It's really
unique.
Cool.
I've not heard of that model replicated many times.
It's very unusual, and I will tell you that university colleagues are very quick to kind of brush me off when I tell them that we have it. And so I always try to find a not super obnoxious way to work into the conversation that I think we've just had our 7th journal publication. And we've been in existence for 9 years. So that rate of productivity is extremely unusual, even for people who are full-time academics. And so that starts to help people appreciate that we're actually pretty serious in this undertaking.
Wow, congratulations. I know I've actually, in working in girls' schools and now in co-ed schools, we've been able to utilize a lot of the research, just one, to just learn about what's happening with girls' lives, but two, just to even provide us with discussion amongst our faculty and staff and parents about, what should we be thinking about, what might we be thinking about, and even that just raises the discourse, knowing that research is out there.
And well, exactly. I mean, first of all, I cannot tell you how happy it makes me. We kind of quietly do this work here, and then we put it up on the website and kind of forget about it. I mean, we're sort of focused on the next thing. So the idea that there are people out there looking at and working with and thinking about what we're doing, makes me so happy. And I will tell you that as I've moved into this much more public sphere, what I realize is the goal is not that you just throw down the results and say, there you go, everybody, like go do something with it. The goal is that people have better conversations than they were having before. And even, it's an interesting thing. I write this monthly column for an online site of the New York Times. And, and I've kind of stopped reading comments, because, it's great when they're really gratifying, but it's not so great when people kind of, go off on some bizarre tangent. And one of the places that I've kind of come to is, but at least you're having a conversation we weren't having before. And at least people are debating about why girls roll their eyes, as opposed to just blowing it off, or being obnoxious about it. And that, to me, has become what I realize that's the end game, not to make a point or to get everybody to agree, but to create a context in which a conversation can happen that wasn't happening otherwise.
So can you give us a couple of those sweet spots where you feel like those conversations are blossoming right now based on your research, or those conversation starters have really... Yeah, I know the eye rolling thing has come up recently. Where do you feel most gratified with the work and the conversations that are happening?
Well, I feel like the luckiest person I know, and I really mean that. I feel like I have these things that's super interesting to me, girls and research and parenting, and that somehow I've been given access to platforms where I can share my thinking with a broader audience. So obviously the Center for Research on Girls, especially that helps me be in touch with people in the school world. And it's funny, I'm a pretty unusual psychologist that I've actually planted myself as heavily in the school world as I have. But I think people in schools, and I will say this, I have a slight bias, people in independent schools, even though I did not go to independent schools myself, these are the smartest people I've ever encountered, and they know more about kids than I will ever know. And I will also tell you, I'm married to an independent school teacher, so I live this at home. I get to spend my day and a couple days a week in it. So the fact that I've gotten to be part of that and then disseminate through the independent school world, and then of course our stuff's available to anybody who wants it. I think we're just best known, in the independent school side. That's been fun. And then obviously, the fact that the New York Times lets me say what I want to say once a month, and that Random House decided that it was worth backing this book of mine, just means, I'm still adjusting to it. It's sort of a funny feeling to have as much exposure as I do these days. But I mostly think how did this happen that I get to just, have my thoughts and write them down and then, people put them out into the world. It's kind of an amazing thing.
For those folks who haven't gotten to read your book Untangled yet, it just came out recently, right?
About a month ago yesterday.
About a month ago.
Very nice.
Okay,
Yep.
and it's already working its way up the Times bestseller list, which is exciting.
Thank you. I was thrilled. That was a wonderful thrill when that happened.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But tell us, for those folks who haven't read it yet, what were you trying to convey by writing this book? Why did you feel sort of the urge to write this?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. This is my favorite question on the planet. Well, the opening sentence of the book is, we need a new way to talk about teenage girls because the way we do it now is not fair to girls or helpful to their parents. And that's the reason I wrote this book. People talk about teenage girls in ways that are actually pretty despicable, and they do it pretty freely. Oh my God, they're crazy, or they're so dramatic, or I'm so glad I have sons. These are things that people just say in common conversation. And I've even come to think, man, we talk about teenage girls in a way we would never talk about a minority group. We would never talk about adult women. I mean, like, just somehow they're fair game for a lot of unkind, um, commentary. And instead of that, what I want to have parents and educators and anybody who's working with girls think, what I'm proposing is, look, adolescence is complex. There's a lot of activity that happens in this phase of development, and we can see it in terms of 7 distinct transitions that girls are working their way through as they are moving through the teenage years. And all of this stuff that looks dramatic, and all of this stuff that looks crazy, and all of the ways you no longer understand your daughter, all of this can be understood in terms of long-standing, universal, systematic transitions girls are going through. So there's 7 transitions, 1 per chapter, and in some ways they're all happening simultaneously, and in some ways they kind of go in an order, probably beginning 6th grade and ending in 12th grade. So they are parting with childhood, joining a new tribe, harnessing emotions, contending with adult authority, planning for the future, entering the romantic world, and caring for themselves. And every chapter sort of walks parents through, or educators through, these different transitions, how they look on the surface. I help parents make sense, adults make sense of behavior that otherwise doesn't make good sense. And then every chapter ends with a section called When to Worry. And that's when I talk about where that developmental transition is no longer going well or has become stuck. Mm-hmm. Because so much of the book is about all of the super weird stuff that's totally normal. There also has to be a part of the book that says, okay, this isn't normal.
Gosh, what a...
Oh. Did we lose Arvind?
He seems stuck.
Yeah, he's stuck. So, yeah. So tell us the path kind of towards the book, right? So you've talked, like, you have this research, like, where did you decide that it was important to be a book? And like it just came to be, and what was that process like? And where do you see it coming from here?
Oh, good questions. So in terms of how the book came to be, I've always written I've actually written 2 other books. I've co-authored 2 other books, one about college teaching and another which is a textbook in my field. And so writing a book length was sort of something I've done for a long time now and that I care about. But the way this book came to be is that in my role at Case Western Reserve University, I train young graduate students how to be psychologists. And one of the things that happens when you're a graduate student is you invariably get hugely chaotic cases. And you get them because you're working at a $5 clinic.
Yeah.
That, this is just how it works, and it's right. Terrible for the consumer, and it's probably not good for the graduate students, but this is the reality. So I have these wonderful, early 20s, mid-20s clinicians coming in, green as can be, and they are bringing to our supervision these wildly chaotic adolescent cases where so much of what we are accustomed, especially maybe in independent schools, to having in place is not in place, things are not going well. And I think to help them manage the cases and to help me supervise them through the cases, I had to come up with a system where we could check off some boxes of adolescent development. And we could look at this real kind of mess and say, all right, is this person parting with childhood? And has this person found friends? And can this person manage their emotions at all? And are they bothering every grown-up they know? And as soon as we could start to think in this framework that I ended up writing for Untangled, it actually calmed me down, and then shaped our work. Because we could say, okay, they've got 4 of these 7 boxes checked. All of the work goes towards helping them move forward on or restart on the places where they're stuck. So it actually came out of trying to help my graduate students, but then when I stood back from the idea, I thought, actually, parents should know all this, and it would be helpful for them to make sense of their daughters, whether or not their daughters are in therapy or need therapy.
So can I ask you the question that I get all the time from parents
Sure.
for many years, that are kids different now than they were maybe a generation ago? Are girls going through different things? Is it a fundamentally different adolescence than it was for, let's say, us?
No. I absolutely believe not. It looks different in some ways. One of the things I did in my book, and it was so fun to do this, is I quote Anna Freud all through. Because what she says applies so cleanly to today's adolescents, and most of the quotes come from 1958 or 1965.
Wow.
And yeah. I mean, one of the first quotes in the book is about how kids retreat to their rooms. And there's this beautiful quote where she says, "Upon adolescence, teenagers start acting like a boarder in their own home." You know, and it goes on like something like, usually a very unpleasant one so far as the rest of the family is concerned. You know, and
Wonderful.
all true. And so what I'm arguing is these 7 transitions, we went through them, our parents went through them, kids are going through them. There's not some bizarre new adolescence in front of us. But things are different, right? I mean, we didn't have texting. We didn't have technology. I mean, and technology is probably the biggest game changer. I also think teenagers are under vastly more pressure than we were.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know, I went to Yale. I would never be admitted to Yale today. And when I think about my teenage years, when I was not in season, my friends and I, we were all athletes. When we weren't in season, we spent 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon just goofing off. You know, and there is not a kid in America today who is targeting an Ivy League college who even has the beginning of that opportunity.
So it sounds like while the kids aren't different, perhaps the experiences they're having are different. Do you feel like that's for the better? Is that, you know, for the worse?
I think it's pretty hard I think there's a lot of strains on adolescents. I mean, I think they're pulled in a lot of directions, and the expectations are pretty high. And I think they want to meet them. I think they also have way better distractions than we had. You know, I think that you know, everybody kind of bags on teenagers for how they use technology, and I am sure if I had access to the kind of technology they have when I was a teenager, I would have used it in the exact same way. I would have been in contact with my friend constantly. I would have watched tons of television. I mean, we just didn't because we couldn't. So, but I think that, you know, that's a challenge, is that, you know, we have these super high expectations, and then they have access to more, you know, kind of fun forms of leisure than we ever did that can be distracting. So I think managing both the higher expectations and all of the interferences and distractions, that's hard. And I think adults play a part in creating these environments, and then we give kids a hard time for not functioning well within them.
I was meeting with some 3rd grade parents yesterday, and it's just incredible the amount of anxiety and like kind of the challenges they have, just like how much technology, where does it fit in, you know, and these are, you know, 3rd grade parents, 5 of the 30 who have kids on Instagram already, and you know, you're just like,
wow.
You know, it's this constantly moving shift. And in the four years I've been here, I started talking to 5th grade parents, and now I'm down to 3rd grade parents. Like, it's just getting younger and younger, and kind of the conversation about how to give children free time and what the balance is, because so much revolves around screens. You know, like it's watching TV, like you can watch TV, it's everything. It's like, you know, what I described, it's the telephone, it's the screen, it's all of the things that were separate 20 years ago are now like into this one
in your hand
thing that's in your palm, and so managing that is just really complicated and anxiety provoking for parents.
Absolutely, and I think this is where schools can play such a hugely key role, you know, in giving guidelines. And, you know, we can't enforce them, and we can't, you know, make parents do what we suggest. But I think parents often look to the school, you know, for some sense of things. And then, of course, we can help in some ways with class norms, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we're saying, you know, look, it's the school's recommendation that 3rd graders can wait, you know, and we strongly recommend that. You know, that makes it easier for parents to go back to their kid and say, you know what, it's not me, it's the school. You know, they're being the jerks about it, you know. But I think that that's the place where we can really hold hands with parents and try to be useful.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I do that, and I give them that shelf to lean on, and it's still it's tumultuous, and it changes at every corner.
It is such a moving target. It is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And all I will say, I mean, what I have found is there's no simple answer on these, right? There's no like nugget of parenting advice that gets people through, right, when it comes to technology. No. But I think in some ways, like, what I say to parents is figure out what your priorities are. Like, what are the priorities for you as a family? Is it that your kid is sleeping? Is it that you're eating dinner and actually speaking to each other? Is it that, you know, your kid is safe and getting their homework done in a totally not frantic way. Okay, then do everything you can to protect those. So it's less about the no, 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 and more about the yes, yes, yes. Like, you can't have that because we are eating dinner as a family, and that's a priority we've made. Or you can't have that because you need 10 hours of sleep up until at least 6th grade, and so the technology has to get shut down so that's possible. So it's, I think, sometimes a little bit easier to frame it in terms of what we're protecting as opposed to what we're banning.
So I want to come back to where you started with the opening of your book, because this is something as an educator who works with adolescents that is so painful for me to hear the sort of way, I would say, just young people in general are talked about, but in particular girls. And I wonder if you got a sense of any, like, how we got here,
I think
how we get out of here.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And actually, I have a fabulous clinical colleague. She and I share our private practice suite, and we also both consult to Laurel. And yesterday, I mean, we were both here in our suite yesterday, and she was like, you know what, like, this girl I just saw, and she is functioning so much better than she has a right to, you know, and the way that people talk about these teenagers is so appalling. And I think we all feel that, especially in schools. We get to know the families. And my overwhelming response when I get to know a girl's family when she's struggling is I usually feel like, I cannot believe this kid is doing as well as she is, right? In light of what she is up against, this kid is just crushing it. You know, not doing as well as we want her to do, but way beyond what we would expect.
Right.
So how do we get there? One is, I think in some ways, teenagers feel like fair game, and it's always fun to have somebody who feels like fair game. I mean, I think that, you know, it's just this human impulse to kind of trash somebody. And somehow we've agreed that there's all of these groups we do not trash, but somehow teenagers remain somehow fair.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of adults who don't like adolescents. And I think it's because they feel either intimidated by them. I think that teenagers, see through adults in a way that no other age ever does. And I think adults sense that and unconsciously can trash teenagers because they don't like that aspect of adolescence. I think others of us, and I bet you guys, and I would put myself in this category, I love this about teenagers. Like, I think it's a riot, you know, and I will sometimes get with them and just for, like, to entertain myself, I'll be like, what's the dumbest thing you watched an adult do this week? And then they're like, don't even get me started, right? And because it's so right, you know, they're so right. No, you should do this. I mean, it's so fun to do this. And they are so glad to have somebody ask. And then the other thing is, I think that often adults feel like a teenager just broke up with them, right? I think, you know, if you're a parent and your kid used to tell you everything and then she just goes to her room and doesn't want you to bother her so much, I mean, I think it feels like the end of a love relationship, right? Yeah. And then you always just talk bad about your ex because that just makes you feel better. You know, I think there's that. I think there's envy. You know, I think there's this sense of like this rich developmental moment full of potential, and they're gorgeous, right? The boys and the girls, and like all of it is laid out before them. And we are settled into our sort of sad middle-aged decisions, you know, or good middle-aged decisions, but they are what they are, and our waistlines are expanding, and, you know, our hair is changing. And I think that there can just be this, like, this envy that comes out as derision. And then, of course, I mean, teenagers do stupid stuff sometimes, and of course they're rude to grown-ups. But I think that in no way, you know, matches or warrants how we speak about them. Does that feel right? I mean, what would you throw on the pile?
Oh my gosh, that felt really right, you know, and I don't think I would have said it like that at all, but it felt really right. I do think there is this threatening quality about teenagers, and even someone who works with teenagers, like, I think of, like, I'm on the subway, a group of teenage boys that's in the subway, and I'm just like, oh god, they're so loud, they're swearing, there's other kids on, you know, I'm just like, what are these guys knuckleheads getting themselves into, basically? I feel like such an old man, you know, in that moment. And then I think to myself, like, if I actually needed to speak to them, like, what would I say to them? You know, if I wanted them to do something differently, what would I say to them? I mean, I hear people yell at them all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes, actually, for people who are courageous enough to stand up to a group of teenagers. Most people just kind of move to the other end of the subway car away from them. But I do feel like there's like a lack of willingness to hear what they have to say for some reason. And that then creates your own stories about what they're doing and why they're doing it.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I also think that we don't harness teenagers, like we compartmentalize them in school and we give
Hmm.
them work, but we don't use them for that that clear feedback or that the honesty that they could bring to
Oh,
the
yeah.
world. And I think that's part of their like antagonism and the antagonistic relationship that ends up being between teenagers and adults is that we don't engage with teenagers enough as adults, and I think we're missing out in society. Like I'm really interested in kind of the movement to like get kids out of school and more into the world and more engaged outside of what we call school at an earlier age, because I think that that could start to shift the conversation. The more people understand teenagers and can see them in the
Yeah.
world, the better off we'll be.
I think that's right. And I think, I mean, one of the studies I talk about in my book is teenagers live up to expectations and down to them also. So if adults treat teenagers like they're going to be jerks, they often kind of act like jerks. And when adults say, you know what, I think you're really smart, I think you've got a lot going on, like tell me what you're thinking, what comes out of their mouths is amazing. And I also think I loved being a teenager. I had the nicest adolescence. I fell in with this great group of girls. There were four of us all together, and we like had so much fun and had terrific broader group of friends. And I think for me, I get around teenagers and I have this sort of happy memory, and then I'm excited to hear what they're up to, and then they tell me a huge amount because I think they can smell adults who think they're great and adults who don't like them.
Yep.
And I think they're very forthcoming with adults who think they're great. But I also think a lot of people had a pretty rough go as a teenager, and they get around teenagers, and that all comes back, and they just don't want any part in it. And I think teenagers smell that, and those interactions often go pretty badly.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're running short on time, but I'd love to like just step 1 degree further into talking about girls in specific, since that's where your focus
Sure.
is, where the book is, and that's where your opening line is about. And you opened with this in our discussion of just that there is a somehow this kind of general acceptance that the way we talk about girls is tolerated and almost encouraged to a point, and just
Yeah.
you can add to like how you think that is.
It's funny. I think that all of the stuff we said about teenagers, like the way that they feel kind of unpredictable and threatening, and they see through us, and full of kind of exciting and also frightening potential, I think some of that may get laid on girls a little bit more. I think that people may see girls as having an even more nuanced eye, to adult personality. And I think, honestly, the kind of the sexual aspects of girls, like I think the kind of public sexuality, the ways in which, we can observe their bodies, and people do, and their bodies are on display all the time, I think that just takes up a lot of adult anxieties several notches further. And then I think that then pulls for an even more kind of punishing response from adults. Um, and and I think that's such an unfair burden to girls, because what is amazing to me is how often I mean, I have 2 daughters, and I will stand there talking to a grown-up who otherwise is a well-educated, thoughtful, kind person, and the topic of teenagers will come up, and they will say in front of their own adolescents and in front of my daughters, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I don't have daughters." Like, it's often like right in front of teenagers.
Yeah.
And I think, how are we going to have good working relationships with people that we talk about this way right in front of them?
Mm-hmm.
And I will say my favorite chapter in the book, most fun to write, most fun for me to kind of go back and look at again, is chapter 4, which is called Contending with Adult Authority. And what I'm arguing in that chapter is, teenagers not getting along with adults is not this like icky side effect of puberty. It's actually a central function of being a teenager. We can position ourselves in much better ways through that interaction.
Mm.
And that chapter, I think, is also applies to girls and boys totally equally. I mean, and I would say a few of my chapters are pretty universal in that way too.
Hmm. If you had to give some advice for the parents out there or the educators out there, maybe even a challenge to maybe hold ourselves up to a higher standard, where would you have people start?
Well, it's funny actually. If somebody said to me, you can no longer use the title Untangled, like I'm taking that, somehow we like magically make that not your title anymore for this book. I wouldn't really do this, but then the title would be "It's Not About You," because I think that so much of adults' experience of teenagers is that it feels really personal. Like, she's talking to me today, why is she talking to me? She's not talking to me today, why is she not talking to me? And I think that then sets things down a path that's not very useful. And I think the whole point of the book is for me to say, all that stuff your teenager is doing, it's because of something she's working out for herself. You are a bystander, you are occasionally pulled into this, but it is not about you. And when adults can, but I think the goal of the book is to give adults somewhere else to stand, right? To say, this isn't about you, but here's what it is about. And then all sorts of new options open up, all sorts of new decisions are available to parents and to teachers. But I think the first thing we have to do is get ourselves out of there a little bit.
Oh, thank you. I love that. I'm reminded of a portion in Michael Thompson's book, It's a Boy, which I'm guessing you probably read, where he talks about your job is not to develop your child. Nature takes care of that. It's to learn who your child is. I appreciate that.
That's mostly the goal. Yeah.
My other favorite adolescent line is, they're on a roller coaster at moments, and it's your job as a parent to stay off the roller coaster, observe, wave, and then like figure out what's going on the roller coaster. So
exactly. No, and that's another way of saying this is not about you. Like, your kid is going through a lot. Your job is to try to be supportive.
So Lisa, before we end, can you tell people where they can find you if they want to?
Sure.
Like, where are you being published? Where, tell us where they can get a hold of you or look for you.
Thank you. So I'm so fortunate. The New York Times actually ended Motherload, which was the online blog that I wrote for, and folded it into Well Family, which is a much larger and more prominent feature in the New York Times. And so I'm now monthly in Well Family. I'm actually waiting to learn today when my next column comes out there, because they've changed the schedule up on me a little bit. So once a month in Well Family, you can find me in the New York Times. And then I also I have my own website, which is drlisadamour.com, and I always put up my articles and my press stuff there. And then I'm on Twitter at Damour, just handle at Damour, and I always pump my stuff out that way. So those are the best places to find me. And then I may pop up other places from time to time, but anything, if you go to my press page of my website, everything is there. My website becomes a very convenient kind of one-stop shop for the stuff I'm up to.
Great.
And I have
Go ahead.
I have an email list. I have an email list that you can sign up for at my website, and I send out emails probably once a month where I also just consolidate, like, here's the latest stuff I've written, here's this, here's other stuff, that's going on. And so that way, if people want to be really low-key about it, that it will deliver itself to you in your email box once a month with, the updates of what I've been working on.
Nice. And then I would encourage people to pick up Lisa's book, Untangled, as well. Regardless of whether you have girls or not, that there's a lot of a lot of things we can be doing better as a group of adults to support girls in their development.
I really appreciate that. I was at a school recently, and I walked in the room, and there were 7 adults in the room, and they all had their books out, and they all had them marked up, and it just is such a weird and wonderful, part of me believes that no one's still actually reading this thing, but I think they might be. So.
You're definitely right.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for listening to 21st Century Learning, exploring the education of technology and learning. We'll be back in a few weeks. And in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at arvind, and at Alex Ragone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.